After drugs and weapons, humans are the most trafficked commodity in the world.
Human trafficking is exploitation. We don't think it happens in Canada, but it does.
They target Indigenous youth as they target any person. They target anybody that they think they can control.
We see this through labor trafficking. We see this through sex trafficking. We see forced criminality of gang affiliation.
They'll present gifts and gifts and gifts and gifts, and nothing's for free. And that's part of power and control.
What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern-day slavery.
Human trafficking is exploitation, where an individual, a gang, or an organized body asserts control over another person through force, fraud, or coercion to make them do something that isn't in their best interest.
There are different types of human trafficking, including sex trafficking, forced labor, domestic servitude. It involves recruiting, moving, or holding victims to exploit them for profit. Traffickers can control and pressure victims by force or through threats, including mental and emotional abuse and manipulation.
They might see a youth wanting to live a certain lifestyle, and they'll present gifts and gifts and gifts and gifts, and nothing's for free. So there's going to come a point where the youth owes and becomes indebted to the trafficker. And that's part of power and control.
There are so many misconceptions about trafficking in Canada, but it's not a stranger. It's someone the young person knows. The process of grooming, of luring, can take months, if not years. We also don't think that men are trafficked when they are. We also think that people aren't trafficked at the age they are. 13 is young. We don't think that people can be trafficked by family members, but they are. And the biggest thing is we don't think it happens in Canada, but it does.
The Indigenous community only make up 4% of the Canadian population, but they roughly make up 50% of trafficking victims. Despite the richness of our culture and resiliency, our communities remain vulnerable to this crime.
Young Indigenous men more often trafficked into gang affiliation. Young Indigenous women might be trafficked into the commercial sex industry.
They target Indigenous youth as they target any person. They target anybody that they think they can control and who they can make money from.
Where does human trafficking happen? Human trafficking happens in big cities, suburbs, and rural towns.
In British Columbia, we do see the whole spectrum of human trafficking. We especially see this happen in huge hubs, places like Vancouver, places like Prince George or Whistler or Kelowna, where there is a high influx of money and people who are there temporarily. And especially when it comes to places close to Indigenous communities, we see that exploitation of Indigenous land as it correlates to exploitation of Indigenous bodies.
Traffickers and recruiters, they will move victims around so they don't get caught. It's not uncommon for a victim to be moved around to multiple towns and not even know what town they're in.
In northern areas, there is more space for someone to be isolated. Young people will be trafficked up north with the promise of a job that does seem too good to be true. But we also see the same for sex trafficking. And because of the remoteness, people don't feel as though they can access supports. But they can. They can access supports from local communities. And I want to be clear that anyone under the age of majority, 18, cannot consent to sex work. There's no such thing as consensual sex work for minors. It is child sexual exploitation.
Anyone can fall prey to being trafficked in Canada.
Traffickers target anybody. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what the clothes you wear look like, it doesn't matter what group of social friends you have, traffickers target anybody.
What we're talking about is whose unmet needs are being targeted. So we see young people, especially, the age of trafficking more often now is starting at 13, where we see low self-esteem, loneliness, maybe challenges in the home, the impact of colonization, as well as gender identity.
Traffickers most often target people who are children and teenagers, in foster care, have suffered abuse and violence, from Indigenous or racialized communities, identify as 2SL LGBTQ+, living with disabilities, struggling with money, working in remote areas, isolated from social supports. Where do traffickers look for victims? Human traffickers meet their victims in person, online, through social media or gaming sites, or through mutual connections. Anywhere young people are.
So with the rise of social media, that really creates that culture that trafficking can thrive. Traffickers actually produce rap music, highlighting the life that a young man could live if they join this gang. And something like WhatsApp or Signal or Snapchat. And that's when especially online sexual exploitation might occur.
Why are Indigenous people targeted? I think we're targeted because of what family members before us went through during residential schools. There's many similarities in the effects of residential school as there is to human trafficking. They don't know how to talk about their victimization. They might not even see themselves as victims at this point. They just know something's not right. But they won't go home because they feel ashamed based on what somebody else has done to them.
You're not alone. Where to get help?
There's a beautiful quote that you can't traffic someone who is enjoying a good life of health, stability, community, and care. And so the best thing that we can do to prevent trafficking is to empower young people through education and awareness and create that space of community and care.
Human trafficking is a criminal offense under multiple sections of the Criminal Code. Together, we can keep our people safe, provide access to cultural support, and help bring those affected by trafficking and exploitation back into our communities to heal.